Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Simple Theology. I'm Jeremy, and today we have a special guest because we have been in a series called Dysfunctional Family, talking about blended families, messy marriages, being single. But today we have a special guest, and his name is Davey Blackburn. He did an episode on his Nothing is Wasted podcast, and if you want more information, I'll put a link in the description below. He is going to be talking about mindful marriage. All right, let's get into the episode.
Today, we have a conversation with my good friends, Ron and Nan Deal. And yes, we have had a conversation with them before. They were actually on episodes 172 and 173 of the podcast. And they share their story of losing their son. And that was a very sacred conversation. It was actually one of the first times, may have been the first time that Nan had shared publicly about the loss of their son. And then we also talked about blended families, because I know so many of you guys out there are blending families. You are a blended family. You're stepping into blending families. And Ron Deal is the seminal voice on blended families. He leads a ministry called Family Life Blended. And he basically he's a counselor, he's a therapist, that licensed marriage and family therapist, and he hosts the Family Life Blended podcast. He saw so many blended families coming through his counseling office that he was like, man, somebody's got to create resources for these families, because they're trudging through this particular valley, and it's really difficult. There wasn't a whole lot of resources out there from the church. And so he started creating resources. His seminal work is The Smart Step Family. It's an incredible book. I advise everybody. I wish I had gotten turned on to his stuff early on when Christy and I were blending our family. It would have saved me so much heartache, so much difficulty, so much time. It would have saved both of us so much if we had had these tools and principles that Ron teaches early on. Well, Ron and Nan have co-written a book. This is their first one that they've written together, and it's called The Mindful Marriage. And guys, I'm so excited about this. It has released now. Now that you're listening to this, it is out there, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I have already picked up a copy of it. Christy and I are going through it together. And again, it's The Mindful Marriage, Create Your Best Relationship Through Understanding and Managing Yourself. And here's why I love this. I love this because what they focus on is not necessarily how other people are interacting with you, because you can't control that. They're focusing on, in your marriage, in your interpersonal relationships, mostly your marriage, how do you maintain agency and focus on yourself, which is such a simple concept, right? But they do it through a particular practice, a particular therapy style that gives us a framework for this. And you're going to want to lean in about this, because it's called restoration therapy. And they use that restoration therapy and a very vulnerable telling of their own story through this book to talk about how we can interface as married couples and as families in a healthy and whole way. Because how many of you know when you're blending family, you're broken before you're blended, right? You're broken before you're blended. And so you're coming into this with a whole lot of trauma, a whole lot of baggage, a whole lot of brokenness, a whole lot of fear, a whole lot of trepidation, a whole lot of kind of the entanglements that would cause you to see and interact in your relationship in a different way than you did prior to experiencing the kind of trauma that you experience. See, what trauma can do is it robs us from a sense of being able to trust the other person. So it causes us to show up guarded. It causes us to show up suspicious. It causes us to show up hyper vigilant. I mean, even this morning, guys, Christy had to look at me and say, hey, David, you're not being a safe space for our kids right now, because I was just irritated. I had just stuff going on that was kind of like overload. I'm just feeling overloaded right now with responsibility, with work, and I feel behind. And so I was getting irritable, and I had to step back and go, you know what? It doesn't matter what's going on around me, my circumstances. I still have to, I gotta control myself. I gotta take agency and make sure that I am being the best version of me, the version that God has called me to, the version where God has called me higher to interact with other people through the fruit of the Spirit. And that's why this conversation is so helpful. That's why their book is so helpful. And so before we dive into the conversation, I want to remind you that I teach about an hour long live Zoom call. It's not a webinar. Live, you're there. We interact. We do 30 minutes of Q&A afterwards. It's about an hour and a half long. It's called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story, no matter what you've gone through. I would love to invite you to be a part of that. If you're looking to take your first step or your next step in your healing journey, you got to be a part of that conversation. The next one, I'm not sure exactly when it is based on when you're listening to this, but you can go to nothingiswasted.com/start here or follow the link in the show notes to register for that next one. I'd love to have you on interacting and engaging with me in that. 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story, no matter what you've gone through. Okay, let's dive into this conversation without further ado with my good friends, Ron and Nan Deal. Well, Ron and Nan Deal, it is so great to have you guys back on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I am so privileged.
We are glad to be here, and we love being with you.
It's an honor, Davey.
Yeah.
You know, we spent a little bit of time a few months ago together, and I heard about this new work that you guys are putting out there, and I'm just thrilled that you're putting it out there and that you're being so honest and real and vulnerable about it in your own journey, your own marriage, your own struggles. And I know it's going to help so many of us. I can't wait to dive into it. Christy and I can't wait to dive into it. And I'm so glad that we get to share this with our community as well. The book is called The Mindful Marriage: Create Your Best Relationship Through Understanding and Managing Yourself. And I would love, before we dive into this and the inspiration behind it and some of the principles that you walk through in it, I'd love for you guys to just share a little bit about yourself. I know that folks, if you guys haven't heard Ron and Nan's story, they share a lot more of their story in episode 172 and 173 of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We'll link that. You can go back and listen to those or watch those. But share just a little bit, a quick synopsis, who you guys are, what you guys do, and then we'll dive into this book.
Well, we've been in ministry our entire life. We're coming up on 39 years of marriage. We have 3 boys, Braden, Connor, and Brennan. Our oldest is now 30 and gave us our first grandchild just a few months ago.
And we have to mention our beautiful daughter-in-law to go along with that.
Yes, Liz.
We love
terrific.
her.
Our youngest is now 26 and lives near us, and we got to spend time with him last night.
That was fun.
And just love being with him.
He's adulting well, so that's fun.
He didn't adolescence well, but he was adulting well.
That's right. No, yeah, I would say, yeah. Anyway.
When you got to that finish line, you're like,
college
thank you,
well.
Lord.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
That's what I always say is like parenting. People, someone texted me the other day, was like, hey, I'd love to ask you some questions about parenting. And I was like, verdict's still out on me, bro. I don't know why you want to ask me.
Right.
Day ain't over yet. That's what we always say.
Right.
And our middle son, Connor, passed away when he was 12. He got a MRSA staph infection out of nowhere, and we never saw it coming. And that's what our previous conversations with you are about, that whole horrible grief journey that continues even till today, and we're coming up on 16 years since he passed away.
Wow.
I would say that's the hardest thing we've ever done continue to
This
do.
book is about our marriage struggles,
Right.
but the grief of and loss of Connor far exceeds that.
Yeah.
So Nan's been a teacher she retired after 25 years of teaching kindergartners how to read, which is an amazing thing to watch her manage a group of students at that age. And I work in the marriage and family field and have for close to 35 years doing counseling, but primarily marriage education, family enrichment, and work with blended families. And so I work for Family Life, run the Family Life Blended Department, where we specialize in helping step families.
Yeah. Well, you'll love this. This past weekend, I was with a group of buddies of mine from all over the country. Some of them ministry leaders, some of them pastors, some of them not. But we were there for a friend of ours' 40th birthday, just fly fishing. And so I'm in the cabin, and I catch a conversation over at the end of the living room, and someone mentioned Ron Deal, and he's in family ministry, this guy that mentioned it. And my ears perked up, and I'm like, what do you know about Ron Deal? He was like, I've been devouring everything that he has to say about blended families and stuff. I'm like, yes, you need to. It was I was like, by the way, we're having a conversation with him this week. So it was really cool. So what you guys are doing, I mean, your seminal work with blended families is so helpful for our community, especially, and just grateful for the voice that you guys have.
Thank you. And I'll brag on you. You spoke for me and our Summit on Step Family Ministry that we do every fall.
No. He didn't speak. He preached.
He preached. Davey brought.
I probably should have warned you. You brought a preacher in, not a speaker.
No, it was awesome. I'm like, I could listen to you every week. Yeah. You have a gift.
Yes,
the Lord was working through you that day.
You served our audience extremely well. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about this book because you mentioned it already. That grief and a lot of other kinds of pain really bleed into our relationships. Marriage specifically is not just this dynamic where you have two people trying to figure out how to live life together, how to be partners, how to be roommates. There's a lot that goes into it, and especially pain that we've experienced, trauma that we've undergone. That can really bleed into it. That's kind of what you're talking about in a lot of this. You bring forward this idea of restoration therapy. I'd love for you to unpack some of that and just kind of help us understand that context.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we unpack it, let's just give credit to the Hargraves. This is their body of work. Dr. Terry Hargrave and his wife Sharon. I like to tell people all the time when we're doing these interviews that 3 therapists and a regular chick came together on this project to write this book. I mean, Dr. Hargrave is brilliant, and his concepts are very rich and deep. And so it was very important to me that we take this concept and lower it to that bottom shelf for people like me. And so I just want to thank them for allowing us to share our story with their just gracious body of work first before we start, because they become, well, he was our therapist and our counselor and our mentor, but they've become friends.
Yeah. So for all the professional work that we have been involved in, this book is not us. This book is our mess and testimony and story of marriage and how the Hargraves material rescued us, how it saved us. And I'm just going to add, at a very high level, this has had more impact on my walk with Christ than anything. I've been in ministry for 35 years. I know the best of the best marriage and family material. Nothing has impacted my walk with Christ or my marriage more than this. So we partnered with them to bring what they have taught for years and years in academic circles. We're just making it accessible to the entire world. Wow. It's called Restoration Therapy, but in this book, we're teaching how to be mindful of who you are, how you are in your relationship, and how God wants to grow you up in the midst of the hard in your relationship. At the end of the day, this is about following Jesus more closely so that you're a better husband or wife.
Wow. And I think when I think about it, and I think back to the beginning of our journey as we stood on that stage and took our vows in that snowstorm in Iowa almost 39 years ago, I know for me, I had no idea of the baggage that I was bringing into the relationship. I honestly thought, because of my family of origin, I was marrying Ron.
Who was going to bring you out of all the
I was marrying into a very deep faith-based family. He was going to just become this white knight that was going to ride in on the horse, and just all of that baggage, I don't need to look at it right now. I'm starting a new chapter. I'm starting a new journey. And that pain literally is probably not here today. And little did I know that it was packed away in the trunk of the car. We all have pain. We're all going to bring in pain. We're going to experience pain in our marriages. We've experienced that from one another, but also circumstances that came out of nowhere that we didn't want. And so pain is real.
Yes. Yes. And I'm going to say, she would tell you that she had a really hard, difficult childhood and family, and still has a very difficult relationship with her mother.
No attachment styles. There's 6, and I've learned none.
And so she felt the need to be rescued. I didn't feel the need to be rescued coming out of my family. Healthy, strong, Christian family. My dad was an evangelist. If anything, the message was, hey, Ron, act right, do right, live right, because somebody might be influenced toward Jesus because of how you live. Right. And what I didn't realize is that created some baggage for me. And the baggage was perform. Yeah. Do well. Earn your emotional safety in my relationship, Ron, with my dad by doing right, living right, being right. And there was pressure there, and there was perfectionism that I took out of that, and I carry that with me as baggage into our marriage.
And mine was the abandonment. I realize now, as I've been journeying into my family of origin work, all of those attachment styles that did not happen caused this. I just felt like, Davey, my whole life I was looking for someone who was looking for me. And in my family, the 5 of us, so I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and with my mom and dad, with a very, very dysfunctional marriage, and lots of shame in parenting, lots of shame and blame. I was always looking for someone who was safe, and no one was. We were all kind of trying to figure that out, but there was no one who was safe. So I was always struggling to find someone that I could attach with, and it just left this huge abandonment in me.
So she thought that was me. And little did she know, or did I know,
I wanted that to be you, for sure.
That in my drive and perfectionism to do right, and by the way, what's really behind this for me is I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to be inadequate. I want to be enough. So I excel at everything I do. Husband, dad, work. Well, the work part took over, and work opportunities began to open up, and ministry, and it took me other places, and my heart and mind were always occupied rather than being available to her. I mean, not 24/7. We had tons of great happy moments in our family in the first 20 years. But at the 20-year mark, we hit a wall. 2007, we hit a wall. She was tired of feeling abandoned. I was tired of being blamed and her angry at me as if I was doing something wrong. I couldn't see that I was doing anything wrong. I was following God and doing what God told me to do. What's wrong with you? And we hit that wall hard. And we opened the book with the moment she said, "Get out." And that, it's either you or me, but we're not going to do this anymore.
Get us some help.
And we ended up in Dr. Terry Hargrave's office. Little did we know, he was creating a theoretician who was also a practitioner who was creating restoration therapy. And it absolutely changed our lives.
Wow.
But it didn't change it immediately, because discipleship is a journey.
Sure.
And because 2 years into our journey of working on us, we hit grief.
Yeah.
And that became a huge complicating factor in our story.
So back up just a little bit. Nan, you came into this thinking that, like you said, all of that stuff in your family of origin, everything was kind of packed into a trunk. There was a clean slate. You were not realizing that you were looking for something that you were devoid of or that you didn't experience in your childhood. How did you see specifically that begin to manifest in, like, not just what you expected of Ron, but like how did that manifest in your expectations of Ron as you guys stepped in to marriage?
We went to church as a family, but it was Easter and Christmas. And really, I wouldn't say I grew up in a Christian home. So when I met Ron in 7th grade and watched him till we started dating our senior year, I saw something that I truly wanted. And then in how he carried himself. And I mean, he just seemed to be filled with joy and had a different spirit than a lot of the guys that I had dated. And it was just something that I was drawn to. And then our senior year, we started dating, and he shared the Lord with me. And I became a Christian my senior year in high school. And I started going to church with he and his family. And those families that were at that sweet little church, like, grabbed me up and scooped me in. And it was something that I was longing for my whole entire life. And so I wanted that. I wanted that in a family. I saw those people bringing their kids to church together and staying together at church. And I don't know. It was just something that I wanted and I longed for it. Little did I know it was a part of that abandonment speaking, but it was. And so I just felt like, and that clean slate, here we are, we're vowing to each other and to God that we're going to be together, and that pain is just still lingering. And really, I hadn't been working on it and asking God to heal me of that. And so it was just still there. But I really thought He and this way of life and doing church was going to just fix everything. And, that's just not true until you deal with the pain.
Yeah. So when you guys got married and you began to realize that your expectations of what you wanted it to be,
right,
when that fell short, how was your, what was going on, the turmoil inside of you then, if you were to kind of assess that? Some of this speaks to like reactive styles. So what was that dynamic then like? Kind of paint a picture of that for us.
Right. I mean, I'm dealing with my abandonment, but not really, not knowing that that's what it is. And I'm seeing Ron's inadequacy, but I'm not seeing it as inadequacy. I am seeing it as full-on workaholism and pride. I never saw his pain for his pain. I saw all of that as you are prideful and you are selfish and you just want to work. You'd rather work than, do me and the boys, really.
And same for me. What I saw in her was what was on the outside.
Right.
And that was anger, control, criticism, blaming me, and I'd see her shame herself. And by the way, I was a counselor at some point in our relationship, 10 years in. But
not my counselor.
Exactly. I learned that lesson really fast. But let me just say, I think
by the way, Christy always tells me, she says, stop trying to Dr. Phil me right now.
Yeah.
We could tell you a story about a time Nan actually got a checkbook out, scribbled out a check and threw it at me.
I'm not one of
you guys making me feel normal. This is awesome.
Oh, gosh, I'm sassy.
And I looked at it and said, I'm worth a whole lot more than this.
And
no.
I'm like,
There's that pride, Ron.
I know it. That's exactly what it was. Hey, listen, so we did for 20 years what I think most couples do.
Yeah.
We discovered through Dr. Hargrave's work this thing called dysregulation. By the way, I was a therapist. Hadn't really ever heard of that before. And this really comes from brain science, and it's only 25 or 30 years old to begin with. But the point is that we only knew what was on the outside of us and what we do, and we'd sort of hear good sermons and, hey, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Oh, Ephesians 4, okay, we can do that. Like, we were only working on the externals. What we didn't understand at all is what was driving it on the inside, this pain Nan keeps talking about, and how that pain is individualized for each one of us, and how it drives the neurological reactivity that you see on the outside. So we ended up combating one another's outside bad coping, not knowing what was driving us on the inside. Matthew 7 language, this would be, we focused on one another's speck. We never took the log out of our own eye. We never did the hard work of looking deep at ourselves.
Wow.
That's one thing about pride, by the way. It'll blind you to yourself. It'll open your eyes to the other person's speck, and you constantly focus on that, which means you never get anywhere. You never get past what's really driving this.
Yeah.
And so it's only when you go into humility that you look deeply in the mirror and say, whoa, what's this log, and where does it come from, and what's it about? And that's part of what the journey we take people on in the Mindful Marriage. You are going to map your pain. You're going to map where it comes from. You're going to understand it better than you ever have in your life. But more importantly, you're going to connect the dots to your neurological reactivity, we call it, and how you cope in poor ways, and what that looks like on the outside. You're going to connect those dots. There's an online assessment actually that we have where people can go and do that right now if you just want to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
But
by
then
the way,
the book's
we'll
going to
have
take
that
you
in the show notes, so you can make sure you click that link, because it's an incredible assessment.
And then the book's going to go beyond that and help you figure out how to move out of that, what we call your old self, which is, of course, the language of the New Testament.
Right.
The old self you're trying to take off and not do anymore, not be anymore, and put on your new self in Christ. And what does that look like? So it's very much a journey. It's very much transformation and renewing your mind.
Yeah.
It is built through and through all of this material, and we had to go on that journey ourselves.
You may have already kind kind of stated that in what you were just talking about, but simply, then this idea of the Hargroves work with restorative therapy. What's the distinction about restorative therapy versus other kinds of therapy, and like when it comes to this?
Yeah. So Terry would tell you that the elements, the pieces of restoration therapy are not any different than other kinds of therapy. You would find attachment is in there, mindfulness is in there, basic interpersonal relationships is in there, emotional reactivity as it relates to trauma. Everybody's talking about fight or flight and freeze and all of those things that happen to us when bad things happen in our life. All of those elements are in here. What is unique and different is how it's organized, in how you come to map and sequence your reactivity and then map and sequence your journey out of that, what you're going to do about it in such a way that, in such a practical way. I just think this operationalizes transformation. That's what he has helped us to do. Gives you a pathway to actually do it. Not just listen to the good sermon, take off your old self and put on your new, but actually know how to do it when the chips are down, when you are emotionally dysregulated. That's the hardest moment in any relationship. And how do you journey out of those moments into a better, peaceful pathway for your relationship? That's what's unique about this.
So good. Ron, I resonate a lot with your journey specifically and what you were just outlining for us. I grew up in a strong home. I had a fairly charmed life. I had I would say very healthy, non-dysfunctional. My parents weren't perfect, but they're incredible people. My dad's a pastor. My mom's an educator. I felt safe. I didn't experience any kind of major hardship, crisis, trauma, anything like that until losing Amanda in 2015. And so my entire upbringing was being driven by performance as well. As long as I do the right things, then I had this idea that as long as I'm doing the right things, then I'm always going to be in God's favor, and things are going to go well for me. Right.
Yeah.
And of course, when bad things happen, it really disorients that theology because that's a broken theology.
Right.
But I noticed that what happens when I fall short or I'm inadequate, just like what you were describing, is I double down and try to perform. I took that the short version of the assessment that you guys have for the reactive style. And I found that mine were, so the way that I feel is I feel when these kinds of things arise in relationships, I feel unloved, rejected, insecure, and invalidated.
Okay.
And the way that I respond is I respond with like a passive aggressiveness, a sarcasm, a withdrawal to defend, defensiveness, a shame of self, and intellectualizing. I start to intellectualize, and then I just double down and perform and say, I'm just going to do better. I'm going to prove, I'm going to show you, kind of thing. So talk to me a little bit about, maybe this is a brief counseling session for me.
Here we go.
How did you begin? And I'd love to ask you the same thing, Nan, but how did you, Ron, begin to untangle some of this stuff so you could become a safe space for Nan? She was looking for a safe space.
Absolutely.
So how did you begin to untangle it?
So here's what's so different, because I hate to say this, but we in the marriage education field and marriage ministry field have basically taught everybody systematically without even realizing it, that the pathway to Nan growing up is for Ron to love her exactly the way Jesus wants me to love her, and that will somehow put away all of the pain or baggage that she had that pre-existed me. Now just think about that when you say it out loud. Like, how does that gonna work? It's not. Likewise, I can't get her by my effort to control or get her to perform the way I think she ought to perform. See how I would begin to do that? I'd take my performance and push it on her and then expect that out of her, as if she got it right, somehow I would stop feeling inadequate. Or I would never feel insecure again. Or I'd never think, wait, my identity, I don't know who I am if I'm not a good husband. And right now you don't like me, so I'm not a good husband. So I've lost my identity. I mean, that's how quickly that happens inside of us. And it's all one big lie. It's all one big misunderstanding. But neurologically, your brain believes it.
Right.
And your brain's going to respond in the way that it has learned how to respond to those painful moments. And for me and for you, performance is one of the ways we do it. Control, arguing. It's all about control the narrative around me, and somehow I'm better. And at the end of the day, so to your question, I had to come and realize that it is not Nan's job. She can't do this. Davey, I'm going to say something that's going to sound really weird, so let me explain it.
That's okay.
God can't do this. God can't change my beliefs about me. You see, discipleship is the journey of changing my thoughts to align with God's. Wow. I mean, God could, but he chooses to give me the free will and let me decide. And so the journey of discipleship is, I know what the truth is. God tells me I'm worthy and valuable and he would die for me. But if I don't believe that, then I keep living as if it's not true. I keep living as if it's Nan who's going to give me my worth and my identity. That is wrong. Wow. That's an idol. I'm making her an idol. It's only when I say, wait a minute, God's truth is now my truth. So when she gets angry with me, if I can put on and live out of that truth, now I have a different set of choices. Now I can say, wow, she's angry with me, but what I need to do right now is to be calm, to not freak out, not lose myself, not counter blame and try to make it about her. I need to listen and try to hear her pain for the very first time. I need to go, wow, what she's feeling alone right now. Not that it's my job to fix that, but I can certainly hug it. I can listen, I can absorb, I can be there for her in my presence. That's how I love her. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, her loneliness, her sense of abandonment is hers to manage. This is the game changer about this approach. Yeah. We have taught dependency in marriage. I hate to say it, but we've made one another believe that if you just get it right as a husband, your wife will stop feeling lonely. She will not. She'll stop feeling lonely for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's temporary.
Right.
It's not lasting. The transformation of her mind is on her. The transformation of my mind is on me.
Yeah.
Wow. And Nan, I'll turn that over to you. What were some of the big epiphanies or ahas that you had to realize within that context, regarding what Ron's saying right there, in order to, begin to not have that expectation of Ron, but begin to do that work yourself?
Well, I have this lingering abandonment in family, and the whole time I'm growing up, before I know the Lord, but then after, is I'm looking for that validation in those relationships. I'm needing it from mom. I'm needing it from dad. I'm needing it from my sisters. I walk into marriage. I'm needing it from my husband. Big time. He's a man of God. He's in ministry. He's doing all for all these other people. No, I should be first and foremost, Right. And I'm not looking to God to fill that void and that hole. I mean, there's so many scriptures of I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Yeah. I am your all in all. Your provision, your provider, your defender, but I am looking to that in everything else. And this day we go to Terry. That day, it's so funny as we back up. Two therapists are at the door, and I'm like, okay, you two, no funny business. When we walk in here, we're going to land the plane with me. And Terry was so fun and gracious and said, okay, you go first. And I just unloaded a truckload of pain. Not only from Ron, but from family. Yeah. And he's hearing this and he's seeing this. And he turns and he says something to Ron, which he's saying it to Ron, but he's, making a point. And go ahead and tell him what it was, because it's pretty profound. But I loved that moment because it's kind of like he nailed Ron that day to the wall.
Yeah.
And I was so excited because it was like somebody finally heard me. Tell him what he said.
Yeah, so she had outlined this pain, and then basically he does a simple reflective statement. So, Nan, what you're telling me is that the reason Ron threw you under the bus is because God told him to.
And Ron...
And I'm like, no, God would never tell me to do that. Something's wrong with me.
And Ron...
How did I get here?
In that moment, he starts weeping, crying. It was the beginning, Davey, of this journey for him.
Yeah.
But I saw it as, yay, victory, and you better sit in that mess. And yeah, I'm glad you're crying. You should be crying because you've been so mean, you know?
Wow.
But think about that for me. I'm not seeing him in his pain. I'm only seeing my own stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And wanting something out of him still to fix me. And I'll never forget, in those 2 years we walked with Terry before Connor passes, he looked at me one day during a session, and I'm still all up in my feels. I'm all in my anger. I'm wanting more. Nail him to the wall, and fix him. You know, so that he'll act right for me.
Right.
Honestly.
Right.
And he said, Nan, if you'll allow God to heal all of this brokenness in you, it'll be the most beautiful part of you. And in my pride and in my pain and hurt that I would not allow God to even touch, I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying. I was so wrapped up in my pain and not turning to the source that could help it, but wanting my family to do that, or Ron, that I couldn't even see what Terry was trying to teach me. And then 2 years into this journey with Terry, our son passes away. And I feel the most abandonment I've ever felt in my entire life. Because, you know, my heart wasn't right towards God. And I really felt like he was not hearing us because, you know, we had a caring bridge.
Yeah.
People praying.
You know, I wanted a yes to healing on this side of the veil. The pain, and then that pain was so different than family pain and Ron pain, but a pain that I just couldn't carry. It was so hard. And you know, in true Nan form, I'm gonna take that on myself in either doing or being angry or control or escape. And escape was my escape. And in the evenings, for a decade, I started numbing with alcohol and prescription meds. I could crank it out during the day and help my other two boys and function and teach. But boy, at night I would escape. I'd escape in TV. I'd escape in anger. I'd escape in bitterness and resentment. And numbing became a way of life because my anxiety and my depression just kind of was coming out of all my pores. It was crazy how hard that was for me physically. And then I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't sleep. And so that was a way in my mind to get to sleep, you know, because in grief and in pain and loss, you feel like you can sleep or you can't sleep, eat or not eat. And I was not eating and I was not sleeping. And, you know, basically I was taking on my pain myself. And I wasn't giving it over to the one who could help carry it with me.
Wow.
So I lived in that darkness, and really I was mad. I was really mad at God. He took my child, the one that really got me. And, you know, I'd just gotten done with a play. I'd been in a musical. And Connor used to run lines with me. And he actually asked us, can I go see Mom perform? We did 8 shows. Can I go see her every night? And I would get done and he would go, Mom, you were amazing. He was my cheerleader. Anytime I got my hair done, he was like, oh, you look beautiful. You got your hair done today. Something's different. And the other three were so oblivious to me. I mean, I'm just like, God, you're not seeing me in my life. No one is in my corner.
Yeah.
I mean, I really threw a huge fit over what I needed. I needed my family. I needed my husband. I needed my child. And really, honestly, I got to a point after my heart changed through 12 steps, a 12-step recovery program, regeneration. I hit bottom in 2020. And because of the Lord and his kindness to me and provision to me and his pursuit of me my whole entire life brought that to the forefront through my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. And these restoration this therapy coming back into my life, but my heart kind of softening, my pride, that was in my inventory, that was what came to the forefront. You know, I went in to recovery for my grief and for my husband and for all of that. But my pride. And God said, I need to be all that you need forever. The end. And when I started turning and softening to that, he's like, I can work with this. I can work with you. I've been trying to be my defender my entire life. And when he becomes my defender, wow, our usness is blessed. My relationships with other people and just how I walk out life. I know that's a lot, but I just felt like there was so much pain upon pain. And then with Connor, for me, it was a straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. And it was a long journey. I tell people all the time, I really wish I hadn't wasted a decade numbing. And yet, here I am. And Terry's words are ringing true today.
It's the best part of you now. Yeah.
I'm allowing this pain to bless other people. I don't want anybody else to be left in the closet, numbing, or embittered, or resentful of what is going on in their lives. God can handle it all. That baggage I talked about at the beginning of marriage, he can carry it for you. He can unpack it for you. He can help you carry it. He's helping me carry that grief baggage every day. And he's helping me unpack that family of origin stuff. He can be trusted.
Yeah.
Wow. Whew. Man, thank you.
You're welcome. It's all him. He has shown me so much grace, so much mercy. I used to have this little scenario, Davey, where this little going home vision in my mind of how I would see Connor for the very first time. I used to tell people, I'm just going to knock down Jesus to get to my son.
That's changed.
I just cannot wait to fall at his feet and thank him for everything that he's done for me. I don't deserve it. And yet, my son will be peeking from behind. Mom, I've been waiting. We have eternity now. Let's go. I have no Kleenex. Sorry.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, man.
It will be so beautiful. And I can't wait. And in the meantime, I'm going to trust him. And I'm going to stop taking up that shield and that sword myself and allow him to be the defender. Give it up, man. Every day I have to surrender that every day. Wow. Every day of what I need from my family, what I need from my husband. Because Ron's going to work, y'all. It's, what is it? Seriously, I could lose another child. I could.
Yeah, life is going to keep going, and we don't know what.
But my hope and my trust and my walk needs to be with the one who can be trusted. Because in my own flesh, I can't be trusted.
Wow.
That's one of the things that I think is so unique about this material, is that when you recognize what emotional dysregulation is, it's basically your brain taking over and doing what it knows to do in self-protection, fight or flight. So if you feel abandonment like Nan, or you feel inadequate like me, then for me, I take over. And that's control. I do. I perform. I get perfectionistic. And if you don't like me, Nan, I'll just blame it on you and make this somehow about your argument, or I'll tear it apart and piece by piece and show you how you're wrong about me. And if you just like me, we'd be happy and our usness would be fine. And that's all me on a neurological reactivity level doing what my brain body knows to do, that's my flesh. Yeah. And until I say, what's the truth?
Right.
What is it that I'm living out of, and make choice, take agency over that reactive part of me and change it. That's putting on a new self. That's where I get to discover what love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Oh, there it is. Self-control.
Right.
What self-control looks like in the moments where I'm at my worst.
Right.
And I mean, I'm convinced this is discipleship 101. It just gets played out in the most intimate relationships that we have.
Yeah.
And you may be like me. So Ron's cranking it out over here, and it seems like maybe he's overworking, or he's coming home and preoccupied with work, and he still hasn't unattached or whatever to that. And I'm feeling this abandonment, and I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling, I can blame him all day long. Oh, here we go again. This is what you always go to, and you love that more than me, blah, 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 blah. Or I can shame myself and go, I guess I'm not enough. He loves that more than me, so I guess or I can try to control him with all my words. And, if you would do this and not this, and then you do this, but or I could escape. I could escape into shopping. I can escape into alcohol. I can escape into my kids and doing for them, or whatever it is, or just withdraw myself emotionally and physically. Well, hey, you're going to do that, so hey, tit for tat. I'm going to do that too. I'll withdraw from you as well and not be as accessible. And in all of that, what does that do for me? Nothing. And what does that do for our usness? Absolutely nothing.
Right.
I can tap into who I am in Christ. I'm never alone. I'm never abandoned. I'm never forsaken. Now, Ron can choose to do those things, but I don't have to allow that to affect me. He's making those choices. I could do a confrontation and say, hey, baby, it seems like you're not unattached from work. Do you need a few more minutes? And then I would like us to do this. And I need your whole presence. Is that okay? I mean, that's different than a blame, a shame, a control, and a escape. I can move towards him in that. But just knowing who I am and who I am in Christ, and then I can tap into those. What is love? What is 1 Corinthians 13? I'm great at keeping a record of wrongs. Believe me, I am the Indiana Jones of our marriage.
The archaeologist.
I am. I can do all of those things. When you read that passage, I read that one time to myself, and I'm like, I'm all of these. And he's calling us to be the opposite. I mean, I need to love Ron the way he loves him. Well, that's an upside down economy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That servanthood, that sacrificial, that seeing this working as his pain.
Yeah.
And not his pride.
And to our viewer and listener, if you're wondering which of those you are, blame, shame, control, or escape, that's what this online assessment is going to help you see.
And if you're all four, there's hope for you. And we could start a support group.
I know. I was seeing some overlap in mine. I was like, oh,
yes. And that's the thing. Some people are more one than the others. I'm two of them, really, really good. Although at times I will pull in a third. Nan will tell you she's all four.
I'm all four.
The point is, learning how you react is the first step towards mapping that, understanding it, and beginning to move out of it.
Wow. There's so much that I could say. I'm just kind of in awe of just how encouraging this is, how convicting this is personally, how excited I am to dive into this material with Christy. And also, Nan, just so grateful for your vulnerability and sharing with us. And that way, we talked to you way back, 172, 173, and one of the first times that you were sharing, we were hearing about the loss of Connor from you, that it was one of your first times to share. And now I'm seeing the remarkable work, as we fast forward into present day, that God's done in you, and being able to be with you guys down in Dallas and watching you step up on that stage and carry an anointing and authority that has, I believe, really enhanced the ministry that you guys are doing, because you're being very real and authentic, and it's what they're feeling, it's what they want. Like, they want to hear that, but sometimes Christian ministry can look so polished and can look that it just, there's this veil that doesn't quite pierce through to go, hey, let's get to the brass tacks of what's really going on. And so I think you're bringing a really sweet dimension to what you two are doing together. And I'll say this, I know it's very cliche given the podcast that we're on. You didn't waste 10 years. You didn't waste it because nothing's wasted. God is using all that raw material for this redemptive present and future that you guys are walking in right now, and it's going to help thousands, maybe even millions of people. So thank you for sharing vulnerably in this.
You're welcome.
I think it's really interesting, just as I kind of like think through what I see in a lot of people's stories, and I don't know if maybe you guys have some, if we can pontificate for just a second on like what is God doing in this. But it's really interesting when I see the main thing that you, Nan, were really struggling through was this sense of abandonment. And then here this happens where you lose Connor, and it's just this glaring thing in front of you where it seems like God has abandoned you. So you're wanting to find, your heart's like, I want to find my sense of belonging in my Heavenly Father. Okay, God, would you be my Father if I didn't have a father? And then all of a sudden you feel like He has ripped the rug out from under you. And I see this often in people's stories. Like if I map people's discipleship journeys, and it makes me kind of go like, God, why? Like what? Hold on, why did you have to, like, that almost feels like a sword that you're thrusting through someone's heart, almost purposefully. I'd be curious to hear, because my question was going to be, how did you reconcile that? You kind of talked a little bit about that. I think it was such a beautiful and very eloquent the way you were sharing that, just this raw place of going, Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough, right? But maybe think like, why do we go on these journeys? And either one of you guys, like, why does it take this for us to really even grow and peel back some of these things?
I think my faith was so shallow. I really do. I think it was shallow. I knew what He had done for me on the cross. I just knew some basic things. But I really felt like I thought if I checked off boxes, or I married a minister, prayer was this contractual thing you pray and you get. A plus B equals C all the time. I just really believe to this day that I had so much pride because of my pain, and I believed those painful truths. And really, I feel like at the bottom of it, when I hit bottom, like when I had started moving from, I feel like I played Christianity before Connor died. And then when Connor died, it was like a line was drawn in the sand, and it was like I was moving so far away from the light. I mean, he and I sang so much together. He was our singer. And so he stood on the right at church, and we harmonized together. And it was like, I don't want to hear Christian music ever again. It's so painful. It is not well with my soul. That song, scriptures would be hard. The prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And I'm like, we prayed. We had 30,000 people on a carrying bridge, and you said no. I mean, I got angry, bitter, resentful. But my pride was already way here, not thinking I'm a prideful person. But I just feel like I kind of dabbled in it and played in it. It wasn't this heart connect, this spirit filled that you are my everything. And when I bottomed out, it was 2020. It was COVID. Everything was shut down, and it was like, it was perfect for me because he stripped me away from school. We were at home. He stripped me away from friends and people, and I went into our guest room and got on my yoga mat one morning. I mean, I was done with myself. In January before March, it was like, I can't handle you anymore. I just looked at myself and thought, you are so far gone. No one. God's not going to help you. No one's going to help you. And I remember crying out to Him in January of 2020 going, if you would have me, but I really don't think you would have me. But boy, I bottomed out in March. I'd gone on this 5-day bender after Ron had gone on this traveling trip. So here's my pain. Here's my cycle. Here's our cycle. And I went on the worst bender. And he comes home and is having to crank it out because COVID, everything's shut down. He's hopping on a Zoom call, and I have no school. I have no nothing. I have no friends. I have no outlet. And I went into our guest room and got on a yoga mat, and I literally, physically could not get off the mat for 2 hours. I cried hard for 2 hours, like I used to when Connor passed away.
Yeah.
And at the end of that 2 hours, I said, I surrender. And at first it was kind of like uncle, to God.
Yeah, right.
And but I literally said, I can't do this on my own anymore. I can't do this in my own way. And I prayed this honest, simple prayer. I said, Lord, if you would have me, I want to do it your way. I don't know what that looks like even. And it was as if he picked me up and wiped me off. And on that day, I started listening to podcasts like yours, getting books from Amazon. And we're in COVID, and I'm ordering a book, and it comes the next day. Listening to podcasts, they're sharing books. Got a book on prayer, prayer I pray to this day. This 12-step thing came out of that, and it was as if he was saying, and I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose of faith, It was the dry bones coming alive. Yeah. I was just ready, Davey. I was ready to receive it, and it came in the form of song. I typed into my little type thing of my music, create in me, because that scripture just kept beaming in my head. I don't think I can be clean. Can you create in me a clean heart? Create in me. And to this day, I listen to those 5 songs he downloaded. Wow. Started listening to people like you who are out there doing wonderful things. Because let me tell you, I turned my back from the light. I was in the dark. But darkness is as light to him, as I've learned in my journey these last 5 years. And so I don't ever want to go back. I don't ever want to live life without feeling like this and being filled with him first and then me. I always emoted. I always started with Nan. It's that pride.
Yeah.
I need him more than I need breath. And that wasn't my walk before.
You'll notice what's common between her story and mine is the word pride.
Yes.
And we talk about it a lot. And I'm not one of those guys who thinks I'm God and everybody should worship me. I'm not narcissistic pride, but pride in the sense of, I kind of think how things should go. I just have a sense of it. And, by the way, I have pride in my ability to perform and do really well, be excellent at things. And then I feel really good about myself, like I've gained my identity somehow out of that. Well, for Nan, the pride was the way I feel, I have a right to emote this. I have a right to, and so Ron's the bad guy, and I have the right to, everybody else, convict him, but I don't have to do any work. Well, her journey led to a surrender. My journey has led to a surrender. It is putting on humility. I know this sounds weird, but I think Job had a pride. God gives him a compliment in Job chapter 1. I looked it up. I wanted to read it again.
That's good.
He says to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Now, God said that about him. How would you like, Davey, for God to say, boy, Davey is blameless and upright. He's my man. Wow. Right? Wow. Okay. So now you fast forward 43 chapters, and Job says to God, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. He comes through his suffering, learning something about God he did not know. Even though he was blameless and upright, he needed his heart softened. His theology about God was wrong.
Yeah.
He had a pride in that. And God brought him to the end of himself so that he could surrender and walk with God and trust him with the stuff he will never understand. And that's what Nan and I are doing today. Yeah. Trusting Amazing. God with the stuff about Connor we will never understand. But that pride extends to how I think my marriage should go and what's important and what I deserve to get and how she should be in my presence. Right. And like every day, put on humility and say, no, Lord, teach me about the log in my eye.
Yeah. I love one of the things that you say in the book is this, I'll quote it here: the ultimate source of pain you carry is not any one relationship or instance. Rather, the source of your pain and what generally steals peace is a cumulative story your brain has put together over time. This story is written often from a series of painful situations or relationships and your interpretation of what these relationships say about you. Most specifically, the story centers on your perceived sense of your worthiness to be loved or your identity, and whether you are safe or your safety in relationships. And I love the insight into, many people look at their marriage and they go, well, the marriage is the problem. And your insight is like, well, no, it's a lot deeper than that.
It's a lot deeper than that.
Sure.
It's your sense of your safety or being loved within the marriage and how you feel about that. And the story your brain is already writing or has written about, well, if I'm not safe, then what do I do? You do blame, shame, control, or escape. Those are basically fight or flight reactions. Blame, shame, control, or escape. That's pretty much what all of us do, one or more of those. And so we're at that point in time going about trying to get the safety we're looking for or trying to get the love that we feel like we deserve. So that means, Davey, I've got to change her.
Or I've got to get him to stop doing what he's doing.
And now who's responsible for me? She is. That's wrong. That is upside down. That is dependency. And God's not going to meet me on the day of judgment and go, Ron, I'm going to cut you a break because Nan didn't live up to her job. Like, that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
He's going to hold me accountable for how I reacted and acted in the midst of hard, difficult moments in our marriage.
Wow.
He's not blaming her. I want to blame her, but God's not going to blame her. So I better get a hold of me. Like, this is the message. This is the growing up. I mean, I've been reflecting recently on the New Testament and how often it says, grow up into Christ, mature into Him. Take off your flesh, put on the Spirit, live by the Spirit. We are called to grow up, not just sit and wait on Jesus to show up.
Yeah.
We're called to become more like Him. That means I got to work at this thing called discipleship. And my marriage gives me a perfect chance to put on some of those things as I'm trying to work it out with her.
Man, guys, this is this has been amazing. An amazing conversation. There's so many things that are just packed into this book. So many questions that I wanted to get to, I didn't get to. They're going to have to read the book in order to get to the answer to these questions. I probably was going to tease out too much of the book anyways, but I'm so grateful that you guys share from this place, both in the book and in this conversation, from this place of a personal experience. This is what has taken place in our marriage. This is the dynamic that we operate in, and this is what we've had to heal from, and this is how we've had to grow and mature. And really, all of us, every one of us who are married and just in interpersonal relationships, this is something that we have got to take ownership of and go,
Yes.
It's about my relationship with the Lord.
I will mention that anybody who's listening who's single, it's not until chapter 5 that you begin to even look at the marital dynamic. The first half of the book is all about you and who you are and what you bring. And so there are huge principles that are applicable. Eventually the book gets into, well, when Ron's pain cycle meets Nan's pain cycle, we have a collision, and what does that look like?
Right.
And how do you unwind that? But until then, it is this personal journey of discipleship, understanding yourself, and how you can move out of that. So in fact, later in the book, we have a whole chapter on, all right, everything you've just learned about marriage now applies to your parenting, it applies to your co-workers and your employment and dealing with your mom, and so really it's broad in its application.
Yeah. There's some conversation out there right now. It just seems to be coming on the scene, and I'm grateful for this idea of self-regulation, and that's what really this book is helping us with.
It is.
In whatever context you find yourself in, this is going to give you some really clear handholds for how to identify those reactive styles that you have, and then how to regulate yourself so you can operate with the fruit of the Spirit. That's every moment.
Exactly.
That's where we're headed.
No matter what's going on, right? And that's what we would all say as believers. Like, that's what we desire. But man, I'm going to tell you right now, more often than not, that's not what is happening for me and probably for many people who are watching and listening to this.
Yes.
David, we get to run around with a lot of people who are in ministry and names that you would recognize if we threw them out. And here's what we know. Everybody on the planet gets dysregulated at least a couple times a day. And when during hard seasons of our life, pretty much all day, every day. And this is a natural thing. This is part of the human experience. We're not pinpointing or picking certain people out and saying, well, you might or might not need this. Like, this is all of us. And so with that, it's like, yeah, this is the journey of walking with Christ. Let's go on that journey together. And let's not pretend anymore, which is one of the reasons we decided to lay ourselves out. So fillet ourselves open and just, and be honest and candid, because hiding doesn't help any of us.
Well, his word says that it's the sin that so easily entangles us. You know, it is our flesh. And our flesh goes to that in an instant. But it's when we stop and go, wait, it's not about me. I'm not God and you are God. I've got to walk in those fruits of the Spirit. But our flesh in a nanosecond can go to that which easily entangles us. I mean, I just go to that all the time and go, yeah, that's why, Nan, why are you all up in your feels right now? Because that's my flesh. And that's what selfishly, pridefully, that helps me. Or what I think. And I have to really intentionally stop and think about what is true, what is lovely and pure and holy.
Yes.
It's a journey, and it is a surrender and that breathing and that tapping into God. And that takes some effort and time. And I would say to people who are like, I mean, we had a man once come up after we talked, and he said, well, thank you so much for making me think about my pain. And I thought, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, I really do think it's a good thing. Some people that don't want to go there and they just want to put that and keep it in the back. I think it will have its day.
Yeah.
It's only a matter of time.
Because it's a pain story your brain already knows.
Sure.
It's controlling you far more than you realize.
Right.
That's right.
Far more than you realize.
I think
right.
there's freedom and truth and some healing and joy and definitely his peace.
Yes.
When we can surrender that and trust him with it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when I'm bringing the best of me, she's bringing the best of her. Our usness is at peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not our own peace.
Oh, wow.
His.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, it's ironic that, the people who don't want to confront their pain are the ones that end up getting stuck in their pain for years and years and years and years. It's only by confronting it that we can actually heal from it, move through it, come out on the other side of it.
Right.
What I'm learning to say, Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your brain. Wait, no, it doesn't say that. It says renew your mind. And by the way, your mind will then renew your brain. Here's the neurological aspect of what we're saying. Your mind is that conscious soul that is everything about you. Yeah. And the more you're renewing that in the knowledge of its creator and putting on his likeness, that is doing. We can't just know, we got to actually do, put on self-control, put on gentleness, put on kindness. And as we do that, we now know that your brain has this thing called neuroplasticity. It can change and grow over time. So you may have some neurological ruts from pain in the past, but when you renew your mind, you change the ruts in your brain. You change the physical construction of your brain. Isn't that fascinating? That changing your mind changes your brain, which changes how you react. And so this blame, shame, control, escape stuff becomes less and less and less and less, increasingly diminishing in its intensity in your life. It's how quickly you move into it, and you're finally able to live out of self-control rather than out of reactivity. Yeah. This is the redemptive work God has for us.
Yeah.
We just got to do the work.
That's right. Well, guys, I could sit here and talk to you guys for hours. This is so good, so rich. Thank you so much for sharing with us and splaying yourself open, just like you said, and really for our benefit, which is so Christ-like. Being willing to say, "Hey, here's for others," and just so grateful for everything you guys are doing. By the time you're listening to this or watching this, the book will have already released. And so make sure you pick it up. We've got a link in the show notes, not only for the book, but also for the assessment. Again, the book is called The Mindful Marriage. The Mindful Marriage. And we'll put a link for that assessment in there as well. The Mindful Marriage, create your best relationship through understanding and managing yourself. Even that byline, I just love it so much. Guys, thank you so much.